So what was up with the internet thing, or the different errors?
I'm not sure. It took a while to get there.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Okay, well, welcome this morning. We're in the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and 3, the letters that Jesus wrote to the 7 churches. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
What do you think that what we really need to do as Christians is reach a point where we just do that without having to think about it? And we help somebody without having to think about it.
I did it like this.
That's good. We'll share with us.
There's that.
And not let
Don't I
anybody
see a
tell
little
you
pride
that.
there, buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in total shock.
But one of those letters about pride, by the way.
Rick talked about this morning in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, where it says it says if you think you're there, you better watch out.
Exactly,
You're going to fall, but lest you fall.
I mean, but she was shocked too. She had flat and she was attempting to.
And it was hot.
And yeah, it was like 100 degrees outside. Mm-hmm. And bless her heart, she was on her phone and then trying to get it off. I thought, well, I got to do this. And it didn't take me very long at all. And she was kind of taken back, like, yeah, I don't know if I should trust you. But that was pretty scary.
And you never know what the helping will get you.
Well, and then I think that's the crux of it too. So, when we talk about helping people on the side of the road or doing for others, it's almost like you're allowing yourself to be exposed. You're putting yourself in a position where I may be, at risk here. And then that goes back to the question is, if would I allow myself to be put at risk for the sake of the gospel? Is this an opportunity that I'm letting slip by, or is this, and it's almost like our self-preservation is priority, over what we know is right. And I'm not saying I don't do that. I'm probably the complete opposite. I'm probably the most cynical individual when it comes to strangers, and especially with 3 girls and my wife and everything else. I just tend to be, in my line of work, I tend to, rub elbows with the worst of the worst, and so I tend to look at everybody that way at first. What threat do you pose to me and mine before anything else? But that being said, I think to allow yourself to be poured out, allow yourself to be exposed for Christ, and just stepping out of your comfort zone. I mean, that's the hardest step. But again, just like these people, once you lose charity, you risk losing your lampstand. That's like, I don't think that was the risk of any other church. It's like, hey, look, if you have all these other things but you don't have charity, I'm gonna take your lampstand away from you.
Many years ago, I stopped. There was a car. I forget exactly, but it was broke down, and there's a lady and a kid in the car, and this guy kind of standing around and needing help. And I thought he would say, "Yeah, I need some gas, need whatever." No, his answer was, "If you'll just help me push this up the hill." It's like it's about 100 degrees, and I'm like, and I'm on the bar. Can I go get you some gas? You just help me push it up the hill. Cindy enjoys that one, I think.
I think we all do that. Lord, we want to help you. We'll be your hands and feet as long as it's convenient for me and it's easy, and I've already got this under control. I can give you money, or I can give you gas, or I can do that, but as long as there's no physical labor involved.
That goes back to that book you were pushing last week. I started to read some of that, and I realized I may not want to read that book. I told my wife, I'm reading it with one eye open because I'm not sure I want to see everything on that page.
It's a little tough.
It's hard.
It's harder the further you get in.
Yeah, I'm not. I started with the prologue. Like, ugh.
That's what I think I told you last week. That's what my preacher friend, he just saw me with it, and he said, "Well, that's a tough read."
It really is.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I'll see it. It's just every year.
Okay. Well, the second letter, or the second part here is in the Sunday school lesson. Is chapter 2, verse 11. It says, "Anyone who has an ear should listen to what the Spirit says to the churches. The victor will never be harmed by the second death." Well, this is the letter to the church in Smyrna. And we don't really know too much about Smyrna. Scripture doesn't talk too much about it. In fact, one thing I need to mention, if you turn to the last page of your Sunday school lesson, or at least those of y'all that's got the regular book here, there's a map, and it shows where all these 7 churches are outlined. and so which is pretty good. I mean, it says Smyrna is, if you look down here, you've got Ephesus. It's on the coast, and then Smyrna is also on the coast. It's about 35 miles north of Ephesus, and so the rest of those. The rest of the churches are more inland. Some of them are in like a fertile valley. Some of them are up in the mountains. But that was a normal trade route that they used when they went through Asia. And so Smyrna was kind of stuck in the middle of a bunch of really bad things going on. When Jesus wrote this, it says, "These are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again, to the church at Smyrna. Do not be afraid. Be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life." Well, as far as Smyrna goes, he says, "I know your tribulation and your poverty, and the blasphemy by those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful unto death." So these people were being persecuted probably by people who claim to be Jews. The legalistic side of it again, where a lot of legalism going on, and they were trying to convince them that what their belief was not really true. And so Jesus didn't really have anything bad to say to these people. He's just saying persevere, because you're going to be under fire. You're going to feel those trials that are coming, but stay firm, and the victor will never be harmed by the second death. So as we're faithful to Christ and we believe in him and we follow him, we know that, these earthly bodies will die, but our spiritual body will never die, because we'll be with him. So we will never be harmed by the second death. And that's what he's telling Smyrna. It's like, yep, it's tough. I know how tough it is, what you guys are going through. You're being persecuted. But just stand firm, because you're never going to die. You're going to be with me for eternity. And I don't think we don't really know too much about persecution. We're not, this church isn't really under any persecution at all. I mean, that time may be coming. It may be coming quickly because of the way that our country and our world is going. But unless you've really been in that situation, and I haven't, I don't know about any of you guys. Has anybody actually been persecuted for their faith? Not really. We've got it pretty easy. So it's kind of hard to put ourselves in these people's shoes and say, well, we don't know.
Most of us, as far as Christians, would almost go with the Joel Osteen thing, that we've been almost only blessed with our faith. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I mean, if you really just took us as a whole, wouldn't you almost just say, I mean, that just opposite, that boy, it's a blessing and you need to get some of this. I found it interesting just saying, because you're reading all of it. And that's how our Christianity, let's just take the one good line out of each of those letters, and that's what we'll study today.
And I took exception to that, because there's so much stuff in here. That's why I said I wish we could just take one week at a time, because and this is all good and it's putting across a point, but we're watering it down, if you will, and we're missing, okay, he said do this, listen, pay attention, and this is what you get, but it doesn't do anything, or the lesson hasn't told us, and I think that's true. We have gotten so, I don't know what the word is, we're politically correct, we're non-offensive, we don't, we're just not going to do anything that might cause anybody to have nightmares or think about it or be scared or anything, and that's not what the Bible's about. There's good and there's bad. There's bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. Bad people prosper. But God's still in control of all of that. But we're not really, and I fussed about it with our kids, and when I was teaching 3-year-olds, that you know, it's all watered down. We've talked about that before. That's how I see everything going. It's a subtle way that Satan's come in and said, you know, we don't really want to do that because this little guy cried because we mentioned Goliath. He's a giant and he had nightmares. So we won't talk about that. We'll talk about something else. And the same thing here. We touch on one verse from each church.
Well,
And we
what's to say that we couldn't do what you say?
We can.
There's nobody, there's no policeman that makes us do this thing schedule.
Not that I know of.
I kind of like that.
Mainly because, well, I'm doing today's lesson. It's lesson 8. It goes from here to here, and you focus on that, and you throw it all out there, and you try to get it all done in an hour, and next week it's somebody else's turn.
Why don't we just call it Steve's series?
But we can, and I
And that's how Satan does it. So just thinking today, I mean, how it does this, thinking of Planned Parenthood thing. So they help people, right? Great. Well, what if you disagree with any of that stuff? Well, you don't want to help people.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but you want to kill them.
I took exception to that because all the services that they are providing, they get the health department too.
Yeah.
But it's a tough thing. I mean, but that's how we do this here. But I think you do it. We're doing it everywhere. Let's focus on the good and don't even venture into the bad part, because then you might have to make a tough decision, and that is what is tough. I mean, it's how do you love a bad person? How do you love the sinner and hate the sin? How do you? Because if you don't look at both sides, it's easy. Do I love or not love? Well, I'm going to love. So, gosh, the way the world's going right now is right, because I'm going to love. But that,
but it's not what this
What-
book says.
Now, I just know my Facebook has been lining up with this. I don't know if it's true or not, but the state of Kentucky is saying that the churches can't say that homosexuality is a sin. Don't call it a sin because it's offensive. So let's not call it a sin. Let's just call it what, lifestyle? I don't know, or choice. I don't know whatever you want to call it. Because some of the churches don't call homosexuality a sin. Now, I don't know if that's true or not.
Wow, that's a compliment.
But that's a bold statement, a bold step.
And I think it's interesting too. What he tells these people here is be faithful to death. So even at the cost of your life, in the end, compromise is not valued by some. And it seems like in our society today, it seems like we are all about what's politically expedient. From our leaders on down, what we see is tolerance at the cost of conviction. Tolerance at the cost of truth. And I think that's a really bad trap, because they can argue with that. Hey, well, you're showing love by being tolerant. But really, in the end, it's almost just like like when our daughters are sick and they have to go get a blood test. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, we really would rather not have their blood drawn, but or get a shot or whatever it is because it's painful. Well, sometimes the cure is painful. Sometimes it's not pleasant, and it's that's what the Bible offers. It's that lamb. But it's scary. I'm telling you,
when I doctor, one of the things that I want to have a relationship with my patients where they know they can absolutely trust anything I say. That said, I can't lie to them. I can't withhold information. I just have to tell the truth. That's more. At times that makes me blunt beyond repair sometimes. And occasionally a patient I will really be trying to soft shoe something, and the patient will ask me a direct question, and I'm like, why did you ask that question? And that's the one I did want to answer. Now I've got to tell you the whole truth. And in that, that's how Jesus is. How do you stay faithful to death? Because at some point, God, You may not have to.
You gotta answer that question.
And that's something we've been talking to our girls about, because we were talking about Revelation and stuff in Revelation with family. One of the things we were talking about, I think it was just we were talking about that time when it's going to be like, hey, it's confess Christ and die, or confess something else and live. And we instructed the girls, it's like, no, you just go and confess Christ. I said, even when it comes down to it, this is bottom line is, you don't deny Christ in order to save your life or save your life or anyone else.